So thanks everyone for joining us. Some of you, all the panelists we've met before, and welcome to Bablin, first time we've met you. So great to have you on board. So yeah, just a bit of intro about this discussion. So this panel discussion has come about through the ever-growing issue of diverse representation in the environmental movement. And from what Cardiff Friends of the Earth have been aware of in Cardiff and in Wales the past year or two. It's well known that the environmental movement is notoriously white and middle class, and yet it is not this demographic that environmental issues affect the most. So whilst this has been sort of bubbling away in the background in recent years, the recent inhumane killing of George Floyd has amplified diversity issues across all parts of the world, as we've seen, and across all areas of society even further. Particularly the environmental movement is making us analyse this sector a bit more. So we decided to put together this panel discussion with people from a range of different backgrounds and sectors to have that initial conversation of identifying these barriers and what other sectors have done in addressing this, and crucially, how we can become better at reaching out to other communities in Cardiff, understanding their struggles and working with them for a more environmentally and friendly, socially just Cardiff. So we'll just run through the agenda and a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to do some introductions, talk through what we all individually want to get out of the session. Then we'll have some discussion questions which we've put together. Then there's a chance for people to ask the panel members questions. You can do that via chat, or you can speak if you so wish. And that will be the whole agenda of everything. So as we said, this is an initial conversation. So we tried to find the right balance with the style of questions. We've also had an initial chat with many of the panelists just to talk through these ideas and make sure that we're not completely dictating the conversation, because although Friends of the Earth are hosting the event, we aren't the voices that should be leading it. So just a little bit of housekeeping. If you're not talking, you probably all know this, you've probably done a million Zoom calls now. Yeah, just keep your microphone on mute, and yeah, chat function is there. So, and as Kaz has said, if anyone else has just joined, this is also being recorded, and some bits and highlights will probably be shared on social media. Okay, so let's meet the panel and give some intros. So, sorry, yeah, I'm Bryony, I'm the joint coordinator, and then the other joint coordinator is Caroline.
Hi everyone.
Yeah, so I kind of just said what we're all about. We're a local voluntary group in Cardiff campaigning on local environmental issues. Yeah, and I've sort of spoken for our aims, but really Cardiff Friends of the Earth's aim for this session is to learn how we can be better at working and maintaining alliances with a diverse range of groups on environmental issues in Cardiff. So yeah, if we go to the right, if we'll go to Abdul next. Hiya.
Hiya, how you doing? So I'm Abdul Shayek. I am artistic director and CEO, and the founding director of a company called FIO, which in Latin means to belong, to become. And FIO is a theatre company which works, well, it's based in Cardiff, works across Wales and the UK, and does some international work, looking at amplifying diverse voices and the voices that often are left unheard within the cultural sector and beyond. That's what we do.
Great, thanks Abdul. And then Bablin. Hi Bablin.
Hi everyone. So my name is Bablin Molik. I'm actually a councillor in Cardiff, representing a ward called Kincardine Lakeside. In my other life, if you like, I am working as a CEO of Sight Cymru, it's a sight loss charity. And my background is in science, which is why I do engage with the environmental issues quite a bit. So yeah, that's a little intro to me. Thank you.
Great, thanks Bablin. Got your fingers in many pies, it seems. Cool. Nisha?
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Nisha. I am tonight representing a charity called EMWWA, Ethnic Minority Welsh Women Achievement Association. Big, quite a long name to that, but the focus of EMWWA as a charity is very close to heart. We give a platform and a voice to women in Wales who have obviously come from ethnic minority, who have succeeded or have shown pride in the work that they do, be it from a technology, health, science backgrounds, and we recognize and give this voice and act as a platform for recognition for the work that they've done, we have award ceremonies and we come together as a group and a very diverse one in Wales, and we're proud of it. The next, obviously with the whole COVID situation, we're hoping to have the next ceremony and recognition in 2021 in April. So that's my representation tonight. In my parallel life, as Bablin said, I'm a technologist at heart, I'm an engineer, and I'm also doing a postdoctoral research on cybersecurity. So I work with machines, so environmental conversation is something I'm quite interested to move forward with EMWWA and of course in my personal life.
Great, thank you, Nisha. And last but not least, Claire.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Claire. I am part of Greenpeace local group. I've also got other roles within Greenpeace. I'm a lobbyist. I also deal with the press and the media. And I'm also a trained activist, which sounds like quite a lot, but actually at the moment, most of my time is spent working with XR. So that's taking up the biggest part of my time at the moment. I'm really looking forward to maintaining some of the connections I hope to make here tonight.
Great, thank you, Claire. Okay, cool. So that's all the intros and aims done. So we'll just get right in there and ease ourselves into the discussion. So trying to keep the first one light-hearted, but yeah, so how concerned are you as panelists about environmental issues in your personal as well as your professional lives? So we'll call on different people, but perhaps does anyone want to go forth and start? Claire?
I can if you'd like.
Cool, yeah, go for it. Start us off.
Yeah, so you'll understand then from my my campaign and activism that I've just sort of outlined that I am extremely concerned about the environment. And in terms of my professional life, I gave up my job just before COVID to work for 6 to 9 months as a volunteer. So I think it's like really immediately apparent that, you know, I'm privileged. And although I do need to return to the workplace at some point, I'm extremely fortunate to be able to do this. I have faced challenges in my life, which have prevented me often from doing things that I really want to do, but you know, never anything as fundamental as the colour of my skin or my racial heritage. In terms of barriers, you know, I see a very pale environment and climate change sector, which is very unappealing and irrelevant to anybody who isn't white and middle class. So whilst I don't personally experience barriers to be able to act myself, I see huge barriers for the movement in terms of achieving our aims and objectives. You know, if we fail to tackle racial injustice, and one of the examples I can give you where exclusion and equality really hit me personally in the face was when I realised that when I participate in civil disobedience and I weigh up, you know, I'm invited to participate, and there's a process I go through in terms of how much, you know, what the my charges could be, and how that might impact on me and things like this. But I do know that I wasn't completely aware until recently, but deep down I did know that when I have to deal with the authorities, I'm perceived as a white middle class woman. And so when I participate in civil disobedience, I make a decision based upon how I will be treated. That's part of my decision is about how I'm going to be treated by the authorities. And despite me breaking the law, I expect whoever arrests and processes me to treat me with fairness and respect. And I realised relatively recently that, and it is borne out, in when I go on actions and things, everyone around me is white, and that is because not everyone has the same considerations as me, and I believe that a lot of people cannot consider doing that because of the colour of their skin, and it really upsets me that I get to do something that I think is a really good thing to do, and it is a worthwhile thing to do, and yet other people can't because of that barrier. And I know that there are other barriers to inclusion at different levels. So, I'm talking specifically about dealing with the authorities here. So that, maybe like money and time, the luxury of time, which, I've got at the moment. So I'd say the barriers are not personal to me, but there are very, very big barriers here for the sector. Abdul, did you want to question?
Yeah, I'll come in. So how concerned am I? No, thank you for that. I really, it's really interesting in terms of some of the things that you're saying there, Claire. How concerned am I? I'm really concerned. Of course, like most people, we are all really concerned. But I work in an industry where, we've been trying to look at how we can become more environmentally sustainable, reduce our carbon footprint and all of that stuff. But making theatre often means lots of people coming into a space and working together. And how when you look at the detail of that, how you get rid of or how you continue to cut down on that is really difficult. So it's a tough one trying to get that balancing act right in terms of in my professional world. We really try, but again, as a project funded organization, one of the other things that constantly occurs for us is we tend to make projects happen as and when we have our funding. We're not regularly funded, so often we can't look beyond or too much further beyond our next project, which provides there's a whole host of issues that comes out of that. But I think we're slowly getting there. We're starting. I think the sector as a whole is really aware, and I think there's a lot more happening in terms of people supporting by kind of borrowing and swapping and people's sets that they've used in the past being adapted and adjusted and changed so that new people so that there is a real sense of wanting to sustain and and support and look at how we reduce our impact on the environment. So that's the kind of professional context. In terms of a personal context, I have been quite lucky to travel around the world for work. So I've done lots of international projects. But at the same time, obviously, that's a real challenge because whilst I do want to go to Australia and do some really interesting arts-based projects, I also am aware that I'm jumping on a plane and going to the other side of the world and the impact that has. And there's constant conversations and questions for me personally at a very kind of personal level about whether it's right or wrong. Because on the one hand, I'm going and doing something that's fairly worthy and really important because I'm bringing joy, and I'm, you know, the work that I make is all about social action. It's all about social justice. It's all about engaging with really important issues. But then on the other hand, you know, I'm having an impact on the world that my daughter and her kids will have to grow up in. So I'm, you know, constantly asking those questions within myself. The other thing, there's a couple of other things. One, you know, from a personal point of view is Bangladesh, where I was born, it might no longer, you know, might not exist in 50 years because of the rising water levels, sea levels, sorry. That is, you know, that's a really hard pill to swallow. And I haven't gone back enough. I don't know the country well enough, but I do have an affinity, a connection to it. I was born there. My mother tongue is Bengali. Yeah, I mean, when you really look at it in that way, I am extremely concerned. So yeah, in terms of the representation issue, it's difficult. Look, how do you talk about a issue about the world when the world isn't balanced as it is? How do I go on a protest and, you know, talk about issues around the climate when clearly the current balance of the world is completely it's completely out of sync? You know, the fact that because of my race or because of the way I look, a police officer at those protests might treat me differently. It's just a kind of just a small bit of that whole conversation. The fact that yeah, at the moment there's a particular there's the Western world is talking quite loudly about climate change, but yet the Western world has taken so much and has caused so much of these issues, and yet what are we willing to give up? How much are we really willing to give up? Those are the questions that we're asking, and it feels like at the moment, absolutely, activism is really important, but the world is so unbalanced, and yeah, to have a really real meaningful conversation about this means also to think about the historic context and the structures that have been created to enable this to happen and how we get rid of that. And part of that is about equity and equality. And I know that's a really huge thing, and I can imagine we all want that in this conversation, but how do we get there? And is the activism enough at the moment, or does there need to be a revolution? And that's genuinely an important question to ask. Are we running out of time at a point where we need to revolt against this, outright revolt? Because clearly the way that we're doing things in these kind of democratic responses to the world issues isn't working, because the people in power are not responding. So us sitting here talking about this, like-minded individuals in a space, how much impact will it really have? And I don't want to, I'm not taking anything away from this, absolutely not. But is it time that we do something differently, which is about, you know, is there a genuine call to arms? Because if there is no world left, what are we going to do? Are we going to still talk on Zoom about these issues? Are we going to go and protest about Black Lives Matter? Or do we need to seize the moment, seize the power and change things? I don't know. Just thoughts that are kind of flying around in my head at the moment. Sorry, I'll pass it on to someone else.
Great, thanks. Nisha, I see you want to come in there.
I'll carry on from Abdul, actually. Very, I can relate to a number of things that Abdul has brought up. Claire said something important: time. I think time is a valuable word to work on. I guess I will just share an experience that I had. I'm originally from Malaysia. I've been in Wales. I mean, I've been in the UK for almost 20 odd years. So I grew up in a very multicultural environment. So my notion of being, I'm Indian by heritage, but I'm actually 4th generation Malaysian by being brought up, and now I consider myself Welsh. So, you know, I'm quite the diverse diversity of background in my head. Whilst I look ethnically Indian, I'm actually I call myself, you know, the colonial girl. Something my sister wrote an article on a while back. So just to share a little story. About 3 years ago, my husband and myself and the children, we went back to Malaysia, and we went to some of the local beaches. And you know, when you live in a country like the UK, everyone's going on holiday, or at the time when we did go on holiday, the reference of, oh, go to Malaysia, it's beautiful, it's fantastic, it's lovely, you know, go to the beaches, blue waters and everything. When I went back this time, I think it was last year, that's right, last year, I went to a well-known beach that I had visited almost 20 odd years ago. And to my shock and horror, all I found was plastic everywhere. And I took my son snorkeling, and he couldn't find any fishes. All he could find was plastic bags, paper bags, rice bags, domestic material in what was once a beautiful sea. So it really shaped my question and our family's question on how we have moved forward. Yes, we've moved forward, but where has this forward come to in terms of the environment? And, you know, I spoke to the local island people, and I spoke to the local wardens. And yes, you know, there's a particular fee that you pay to sit on this lovely resort. But it got me questioning, you know, what is the money used for? You know, how are people getting involved, and how is the government getting involved? And you know, there's a lot of discussion in Malaysia currently with the younger generation on how to reverse and bring back that beautiful island that once was. So I think from a personal point of view, you know, it is saddening to see something like that. And I think because in the last 20 years, I've been exposed to the life in the UK, where, you know, we are taught about recycling, we're taught about environmental issues, and it's up to us to make those decisions. When I did go back, I was angry, I was sad, because that was once a country that I remember as being clean and beautiful, and the ecological side of things being healthy. So, you know, this conversation, how concerned are you about environmental issues? I am very concerned, because if, you know, in the years to come, when I do go back to visit my grandmother every year, and, you know, I want to explore other areas in Southeast Asia, you know, your carbon footprint, as Abdul mentioned, is questioned. And of course, you know, the use of plastic and how we recycle, and those questions come into play. From an EMWWA point of view, I can honestly say, so far to date, we have not done anything collectively regarding environmental issues. You know, our cause and the charity is very different. We acknowledge the women who have succeeded in various disciplines, and give them a platform to voice their words. We do hold a lot of lectures. We hold a lot of health issues. We raise awareness. But maybe this is something that we can work with the Friends of the Earth. And I think a platform like this bridges the gap in terms of the single charities working in silos, and actually working together and getting that education from a different charity like Friends of the Earth, and simultaneously run workshops, not only in our case to empower women, to have that voice and raise that confidence. But once you raise that confidence, you empower people, then that discussion then leads to, right, can we look at environmental issues? How can our organization, EMWWA, be a part of the movement going forward? And I think I raised something when we were discussing earlier. We need to change the word of you know, your organization, my charity, into a we. And when you do a we collectively, you know, yes, we will move forward, because we're working together, and we're creating a new community to see how we can help what's around us, both from personal and a professional level as well. Just to complete this question, I've been watching a documentary called Down to Earth. I don't know if any of you have. Netflix have been my friend in the last few months. Down to Earth is a documentary that I've been watching. It's by Zac Efron, and it talks about this American actor traveling around the world, understanding how various communities of different ethnic backgrounds live in sustainable environments and hold precedence to things like solar, water, plant-based foods. And through his journey, it's opened my eyes on how innovative we can be as humans to develop and use the resources around us. So certainly, for example, solar panels. So for as a community, you know, we could benefit from linking with Cardiff Friends of the Earth to learn about these things moving forward.
Thank you, Nisha. It's good to hear a diverse spectrum there of personal and your work as well. Bablin, do you want to come in? And I know you mentioned you've got a science background, so I don't know if you want to add to that.
So yeah, my background's in biochemistry. So yeah, I do have a science background, which is why I do, when I see an environmental issue come to council, I can quite quickly pick that up as an environmental issue and not, as they quite often see, cover up with other things, you know. So, you know, right from in our ward, we have a lake, Roath Park Lake, which you're probably all familiar with, very loved amongst Cardiff residents and beyond. Now that lake has been out of function every summer for the last 3 summers because they have a blue-green algae growing every year. And it was pointed out, oh, it's global warming, you know, that's causing it. So there are other things that the lake has experienced over the years that need cleaning, etc., that's leading to this situation. So I've raised this a few times. So the buildup of nitrates, etc., within that lake over the years has led to this situation to some extent. So whilst the warm weather obviously has an impact, the initial reasoning why this algae actually accumulated in this lake was fed from nitrates being wasted, you know. So I can go on and on about those things, but yeah, so when these issues do come to light, I can see the environmental side and why we're experiencing what we're experiencing within our communities. So, and going back, I think Abdul mentioned he's from Bangladesh. I'm originally from Bangladesh too. And I know back when I visited in 2002, when I actually got married and things, at that point they'd banned plastic bags, you know, and there wasn't plastic bags because this was a country that's been known for years to be likely to be under sea by 2050. So they've actually, despite being a developing country, they've actually taken some steps, if you like, to address that concern to what they can. So you will see fields of solar panels when you go to Bangladesh. You will see, you know, plastic bags happen, you know, any market you go to, you'll be material bags or paper bags. They don't give you plastic bags. And that includes the fish market. So, you know, fish market is very popular in Bangladesh. Bangladeshi people do like their fishes. So it has, but it is a country that has huge population. And with population, as you know, environmental impact is immense. And I remember, you know, Cox's Bazar, which is a long beach, is the longest beach you can in the world, basically, which actually resides in Bangladesh. And when I visited in 2002, it was lovely. You know, there was you know, few buildings now and then for hotels, etc. But I did go back to it a couple of years ago with my daughters, and it was crammed with buildings. You know, it's a totally different scene, because it become a tourist attraction, obviously. So to bring in business and money, there's, you know, there's buildings, brick buildings all over the place around that beach now. So it was a huge change in sceneries, if you like. You'd often go to those kind of spots to experience, if you're living in town and cities, to experience the natural environment, etc. But that slowly had been taken over for the economical reasons in Bangladesh. And you see the same happening in UK. As you know, when the lockdown happened, it was great because cars were off our streets, and we as councillors for a long time been discussing how can we, reduce carbon emission within Cardiff City, etc. So for a long time we've been talking about putting brakes in car travelling through the city centre, etc., introducing congestion charge or not, and all those things have been discussed. And now, when the roads were empty, we all felt it, didn't we? We all felt the clean air. We experienced that, actually, and it was great to experience that. And of course, they tried to then push ahead with certain elements, introducing more cycling ways, etc. And in Roath Park Lake, you're probably aware that they introduced a one-way system to allow space and expand cycling use basically around that area too. So they are rolling those programs out, which is great to see happening. And Castle Street, as you know, has now been closed to cars too. But there needs to be careful planning, and these decisions can't be rushed through sometimes as much as we want to. And there's been some, because they've been rolling it out without actually consulting with people, there's been some uproar with it, etc. There is a need to consult with people and do equalities impact on decisions. And the problem is, whilst they're doing the cycling and they're doing the active travels, etc., they're leaving buses away, and things, and people with disabilities, people with other and working in the sight loss sector, I'm very aware that them rolling cyclist lanes is causing tension amongst people with sight loss, for instance, because, and at the same time, bus service has become reduced because of COVID, etc. So there needs to be a balance in all this, and people need to work collectively. And Nisha said, when it becomes we, and we take people with us, these things work wonders, And if you don't take people with you, then it doesn't work well. And that's something that Cardiff Council need to learn when they're doing these things. They do need to take people, and we have advocated for a citizens' assembly in those decision making, so that citizens play a role in making those and aiding those decisions. So yeah, there's much more to be done on those, and that's a bit of professional in terms of personal why, and I did touch on it, I'm from Bangladesh and things, but to me, the reason I went into politics, the reason why I'm involved in this is because of the future generation, and whether it's about racism, equalities, etc. I am passionately, believing that change needs to happen, and each one of us needs to lead that change, to be honest. We can't expect it to happen just by itself, so everyone needs to get involved. We're not happy with the world leaders at the moment, whether we talk about Trump and things and his perspective on environment, well, you have it there, but we need to get involved in those decisions. And that's one of the reasons I wanted a better future for my children, and that's what drove me into politics in the first place. And even now, my daughters are now 12 and 16 years old, and they tell me, oh mum, there's no point, the world's coming to an end because we're not getting a hold of the environment and global warming, but and they quite often, the younger one particularly, would raise that with me and say, well, there's no point me planning for the future because it's in 40 and 50 years time, it's all going to come to an end, so, and it's disheartening to hear young and next generation to think, even have to contemplate to think like this, so I see the urgency in addressing this agenda, and hence it's great to be here, but we do need to push on and push ahead collectively on these matters, otherwise we won't get the results we need.
Thank you, Bablin. That's a really nice point to leave that question on, especially hearing also about Castle Street and what's happened there. I think we've all been I've been very welcoming of it, but I know there have been issues with businesses and things, so I like the point of the we and like going forward and the consultation and how that's being recognised. Great. I say, so Kaz,
Sorry, can I just raise a point about that?
Yeah, go on.
Is that all right?
Yeah, go for it.
There's a real issue here around class and especially in this conversation. I think class is a huge issue. I think we quite quickly forget, you know, all right, consultation happens, and I know you're a counsellor, sorry, Bablin, but I'm just picking up on this because one of the big challenges is around the issue of whether you have access to that consultation, whether you know how to go through that process of consultation. And fair enough, we talk about consultation, but actually how much is being done to really hear what people have to say. If you have to get a bus into town and you don't have the means or the access to a bike, and now suddenly you have to walk 10 or 15 minutes longer or whatever, if it adds 15 minutes to your journey, and the cumulative effect of that is that you won't like those changes. But how do we get people who are working class communities, and you know, this is going across race, ethnicity, but working class communities to be able to voice their opinions? Because often it feels like it's the educated elite who are making these decisions, and therefore this doesn't matter to them. And that's the thing that we get a lot in terms of culture. Often it's the educated elite come to tell us what our culture should be. And I think it's a similar kind of thing around this issue. We're all, you know, from kind of the gist of it, I kind of see that we all are educated individuals who've got degrees and so on and so forth. But I think there is something really interesting about what you're talking about and what this particular space is and how it accesses people who are from a different class, who are not thinking like us, who are thinking about the immediate, the you know, the next meal, the next paycheck. So I think it's a really interesting point about consultation and changes, but there's a whole host of people who then go, well, actually, this has an immediate impact on me, and no one's thinking about me. Sorry.
The point was the consultation didn't happen in this case, and that's why we left people.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, I missed that then. But what I mean is, I think the thing about class is really important. So that just came out of the consultation, the ideas of consultation and not talking to people or talking to people, and who is the council, who are the council, who are people talking to about these issues. Sorry,
Right.
yeah.
That's all right. Go on, Claire. Thanks for that point, Abdul.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Abdul. No two ways about it. I can access. I know where to go for consultations. I you know, work in and around that area. You know, you're so right. And there's an example just recently, isn't there, where, you know, we've got this post-COVID recovery now, and Welsh Government have got a panel, put together a panel for that. And all they've done in terms of engaging with the public on that, Welsh public, is they sort of put out a bit of an under the radar email address, right, on Twitter, right, on Twitter. So, you know, how you know, there's no engagement with that whatsoever. But I was really interested in what Bablin said, because she mentioned citizens' assemblies, and this is exactly one of Extinction Rebellion's demands, is to have citizens' assemblies embedded. Admittedly, you know, the demand at the moment is for climate change, but this should be enshrined, you know, at every level of government, and it should be what we do. And that really is, it's called, you know, the process for that and making sure that those people are represented is called sortition, and you know, that is a process that will make sure that there's proper representation. And so XR are lobbying for that at the moment, and we're working really hard on that.
We did present the motion to council this time to discuss. Of course, they only allocated 2 motions, and already there was a motion on Black Lives Matter this time, this month, and there was another one on youth service. There was some tension about youth service, so confidence, vote of no confidence in the cabinet. So they didn't actually allow our motion through this month, but we're hoping it'll be one of the motions being discussed in September. So by all means, engage with us and let us know. You know, it is a motion just to call for a citizens' assembly. Okay.
And sorry, just to add to that, and I think a discussion like today is really important because I've learned a lot, and I have no idea about citizens being able to voice. You know, we seem to operate in silos very often, and we just do the cause in which we are running forward with. So it'll be really good as an education to know how we as organizations, as charities, can access and our voice be heard.
Thank you. There's some really interesting points that have been made on that question, and many avenues explored. So it's really insightful. I'm glad that everyone's learning from that as well. Just gonna, Kaz, I think if we skip the next question, because I was just gonna bulk out, and it's a bit of a, it's not, yeah, that one, that's a good one, yeah. Okay, so this is the next question, and this is coming from a more, I don't know, personal perspective or from within your own community or organisation. Do you think you face any unique challenges when it comes to engaging with the environmental movement currently? Have you experienced any positive situations or any negative ones, and what's the balance of that really? So would anyone like to go first on that?
Shall I go first as I went first last time?
Yeah, if you like, Claire, go on.
Yeah, so no, I don't think my challenges, personal challenges, are unique. I think that my challenges, the things that I see as challenges, allow me to be very, very much a part of the environmental movement in the UK and beyond, because, you know, I see my challenges and my priorities as being, why won't the government and big carbon emitters listen to me? So I know very clearly where I belong. But this, and this goes back to something that Abdul said, which I hear loud and clear, this puts me in a little bubble or an echo chamber, because my own views are reinforced constantly, and I'm fooled into thinking that they're relevant to everyone, to such a degree that I've actually sometimes been quite shocked and offended to find out that I'm actually a minority sometimes, you know, in what I'm thinking. It's just that I'm surrounding myself with people who think like me. And I, you know, I go to meetings and I see the same faces, and some of them look quite tired. So I'm really aware of the need to grow and diversify. And you know, we will be stronger together, but only if we're willing to view the world, to literally put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and think about the different perspectives, rather than being so intent on our own or our original agenda that we can't see any further than that. And so for me, I actually see my belonging in the environmental movement, where I feel very, very at home, is actually working against the movement in many ways. It does not help us diversify to feel like we belong and to feel like we're appealing to the same people. It really doesn't help us achieve those bigger picture aims and objectives. That's my own experience.
Thank you, Claire. Does anyone want to come in on that, based on what Claire said, or just based on a different view or opinion? Yeah, Nisha?
I think, the question is, do you face any unique challenges engaging with the environment movement? It's neither here or there for me. You know, every Monday we do recycling. You know, we separate the plastic, the non-recyclable, the food waste, and we do our duty as individuals towards what we contribute to, saving the environment and helping move forward. But what I do know is, in other towns across the UK, for example, don't necessarily do what we do. So whilst we are diligent and we have been educated and we've been exposed to the ways in which the council has guided us, I guess, in terms of what we need to do, It's not necessarily the case across the board in other township. So this is something from a positive living where we live. It is a challenge. It is a challenge because come the Tuesday and the Wednesday, you see not everyone has followed the right recycling techniques. Hence I live down in Cardiff Bay, so the seagulls tend to take over. And I'm sure there's a seagull movement as well on how we can protect the seagulls. but frankly speaking, if we don't do our bit, then the seagulls can take over at some point. So these environmental issues, it is very close to home. Because it is in your house, it starts at home. And certainly for me, I work in the IT industry. And we order parts, we order computers, and they're coming from abroad, they're coming from China. There's a lot of boxes. So from a professional level, as a business, we do engage in trying to recycle the best we can. Hardware, machines, it does leave a carbon footprint. In a personal level, we have a data center. We use a lot of air conditioning systems to cool the hardware because it needs to be in an environment that works best for hardware. So is that environmentally friendly? No, it's not really, but what other options are there? Or what things can we explore in terms of how we do things correctly, or the way it should be to reduce this global warming effect. In EMWWA, from a charity organization, as I mentioned, we have not engaged in environment. EMWWA is made up of women from all disciplines, from the medical, IT, hairdressing, different businesses. So, through these disciplines, we know that individuals are doing what they need to in terms of recycling from a personal, within the home coming forward. But as an organization, it is a new conversation. And this is where, exploring, working together to understand the issues is beyond, there is a cultural difference, but it's starting that conversation. And starting that conversation, running workshops, knowing how an organization like EMWWA can help in this situation, because the people involved in our organization actually can make that difference, because we're from varying disciplines. It's just finding how that platform can be working with the likes of people on the panel here to move forward. So what are the positive, negatives? I'm in between. It's finding that balance.
Thank you, Nisha. Good to hear those points there, especially from a balance perspective as well. Okay, Abdul or Bablin, if you got anything personal to add to that?
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry.
Go on,
Did you go?
go ahead.
No, do you want to go? I'm happy to stop. Oh, okay, cool.
Go on, Abdul. You go.
Sorry about that. So no, I think from a personal point of view, we are really interested in how we might be able to tell. Theatre is a great tool. It enables us to give an insight into how give an opportunity for us to look at an issue from a variety of different angles. And places people in other people's shoes. And we did that with kind of the migration project that we did. We devised a show about migration, and we imagined what would happen if a civil war broke out in Wales. What would happen to people in Wales? How would we react? And it was kind of just really taking the concept and idea of, well, there's a civil war happening in Syria, and that's why people are reacting in the way that they are. And they are, so that was kind of our thinking. And so whether we can do a similar thing around climate change and really think about how we place that story and really think about the nuance and the kind of everyday impact that this is having on an individual or on a character. We're not quite there yet. We don't think there's a script that exists out there that helps us to do that, but it's something that we'd love to do, because we feel like that's the bit that we know really, really well. We know how to make good theatre, theatre that has an impact. So yeah, absolutely. That feels like the best place to put our energy. In terms of on a personal front, I think I agree with Nisha in many respects. You know, we do lots of stuff to try and respond to the challenges and kind of look at doing our bit. But then you go to another place. I spend time between London, Manchester, and Cardiff, and my partner's from Manchester. My mum is in London. I live in Cardiff, and so I spend a lot of time between the three places, and they all have different, rubbish policies, I guess. And yeah, so it's really difficult. So I think from a positive perspective, I'll do what I can. From a negative perspective, it is a confusing message out there, and I almost feel like we all need to be doing the same thing in terms of as a UK-wide response. Because that is really confusing, and I kind of forget what I'm doing when I'm in different cities. So, and I get in trouble. I get my mum telling me off on my partner. But yeah.
Thanks, Abdul. Yeah, it's confusing when considering how small the UK is as well. It's annoying, and you go to one place and you get annoyed by what each place is not doing. Particularly with like food waste now, because we do food waste in Cardiff. Whenever I'm anywhere else, it just feels so wrong throwing stuff in a black bin and just knowing it's going to sit, in methane and all crap like that. Bablin, did you want to come in?
Yeah, rubbish collection. It is very different. I've got a sister who lives in Essex, and they have separate recycling waste is collected. So the glasses are separate, paper waste is separate, etc. But here, of course, all recycling waste go in one bag. They get filtered later on. So every place seems to operate differently. Of course, when COVID happened, for a while, it was all collected as one, so there was no recycling happening at all for a couple of months, at least, I think, in Cardiff. Okay, going back to the question in terms of the challenges coming in getting involved with the environmental movement. I've got, personally, fully support the movement, and politically, Liberal Democrats, being a Liberal Democrat, we're fully behind environmental movement. Where I struggle is probably in, commitments. So for me to give up my work, my earnings, etc., to feed the family, and Clare mentioned, she's privileged and she can do that on voluntary basis. It'd be a struggle for me to do that, to give up my job and join such a movement. And that's probably one of the reasons that puts many ethnic minorities off, to be honest. Going back to the original discussion topics, if they, and Abdul mentioned, if they are thinking how they're going to feed family and put the next meal on the table, the last thing on their radar is to get involved in an environmental movement. I'll be honest and blunt with that. So and that's what we face quite often as an ethnic minority communities in getting them, getting them engaged, because they are working. For instance, my husband's a taxi driver, okay, and if he doesn't go out to work, he's not going to earn. He's not going to bring the income in for the family. And so, and there's many from the ethnic minority communities who do those 0-hour working regime, if you like, and that's something we need to bear in mind. And quite often we discuss about getting more ethnic minority into politics and more involved, etc. But again, it requires a lot of voluntary work, and for someone to give up their earnings and get involved where they don't know if they're going to get earnings and involved in voluntary work, it's a big ask for people who are living at those levels, basically, where next meal won't be earned unless they go out and work. And that's a big hurdle, I think, with ethnic minority families, and it would be a hurdle for me to get involved. It's not that I don't agree with the objective of the movement or anything as such. I'd love to support it, but it is that would put me off on a personal ground.
Great, thank you for that, Bablin. That actually leads us on really well to the next question, about how do we engage us as like a voluntary environmental organisation? How can we engage effectively with different communities to tackle environmental issues, to get people involved? And you've mentioned, huge barriers, and it comes down to lifestyle and you know, your own job and things like that. And I think for me, for a long time, I still think this, can you really, you know, get people on board when austerity, you know, is still an issue, and people, don't you have to solve austerity and wider issues like that first before people have the time or the interest to be being involved? And that's quite wide and quite deep. But as an organisation or a voluntary group like us, is there anything that people can do as part of the movement already to engage communities? I know as well, it was mentioned briefly earlier about going to speak to people on their patch. So I wonder if anyone's got anything else to add to that more specifically. Nisha, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I want to move, I want to follow on from what Bablin mentioned, you know, because of the involvement in EMWWA, being of ethnic minority women in particular, you know, this is, she's absolutely right, you know, something Claire mentioned, you see the same faces. Okay, Claire brought that up. You see the same faces, and I've been involved in EMWWA for a while, and I've seen various charities as well, and you tend to see the same faces. And it can be quite exhausting because it's the same group of people trying to make that change. And especially with a group like EMWWA, you know, we try and engage in a lot of activities with women of ethnic background and give them that confidence, give them that platform to have that voice and recognition, you know. But as I mentioned, the title of environment is not, we have not reached that scale yet. We do, however, engage in women's health, and because you know, the environmental issues does hit your health in terms of, you know, the climate, or whatever those issues are, it does hit you. And COVID, the experience of COVID, with no cars on the road, you're cycling, the environment has shifted. And I know for reading particular articles in certain countries where, you know, somebody was asthmatic and then they were able to walk out and the asthma stopped because, you know, there was no more carbon on the roads. So it does have a direct impact on health. So what can environmental groups or how can you engage and us be together as a community moving forward? We may want to encourage people to, you know, from a recycling point of view, recycle more, but we've got to understand there may be language barriers, you know. Yes, there is social context as well, but language barriers, people not understanding what goes where, you know. Not all communities, and I know this, not all communities have access to the internet. And, you know, and the internet is where we go for information, especially in this lockdown situation. But it's only those who have been privileged enough to have that are able to have access to information. So, you know, access to the internet language for brochures, we may not necessarily cover. You know, the smaller ethnic groups, we may cover the larger ethnic groups, but not, you know, across the board. So, you know, various things we could certainly work together as communities to enhance or to educate, certainly from where I sit, working together with Friends of the Earth to push that movement out and to tackle environmental issues that, and it can marry and sit very nicely with the cause that is the charity of the individual faces here.
Can I? Oops. Brandy, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Come on in.
I did not. Did you want to respond?
No, not at all. I was just going to say, you go. I see you had a point to make, so go ahead.
Oh, no, I agree with everything being said. I guess the thing is, capitalism has done a great job at creating it's distanced us from a lot of the challenges and issues that we inevitably will face by putting dystopian images on our screens quite regularly through the films that are shown to us or we've seen. Through all of that stuff, we kind of go, oh, that's where we're heading. I think what needs to happen now is to do the opposite, which is we could head in a different direction, but action needs to take place now. And so there's something about, and I don't know, the answer to this, to be fair, but I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head. There is something about personalizing it again, making the issues personal, really deeply personal, reconnecting and rethinking. Okay, so older Black, Asian, ethnically diverse women who come from parts of the world who might not be able to visit their countries again before they die because of the impact of climate change. So they might not be able to see those their motherland. People like myself, you know, the fact that if I don't go, you know, by 2050 or after 2050, so my grandchildren will probably never know about or won't be able to go to the country that I was born in. So I think it's those things that will help us, but how we place that in a space is really important. I think that's the big question. And how do we get that conversation? How do we talk to these individuals? And is that through mediums like theatre, film, the arts? Because it kind of approaches it in a different way. It's not a direct debate. It's not trying to convince someone through saying this is what's happening and these are the issues, because they get that every day. So if there's another access point for them, and again, I'm not sure, but for me, it feels like that's a really important space to start from, to really personalize it again and really make us think about the personal impact it might have on our lives. Because otherwise it becomes, and it will always be, about the next meal. And it will be, you know, immigrant communities need to want to further and better their children's lives, so they work damn hard to do that. And so they're not thinking 3-4 generations ahead, because they don't have the like at the time they just have the capacity to think about the next generation because they're working so hard. And so how do we change that perspective? And that's difficult. Like Bablin was saying about her husband, you know, he goes and drives a taxi, and actually how can we have that conversation with taxi drivers? I don't know yet, but we're working on it, and I'll let you know. but I do think there's something about the arts that could do that in a way that I think just the conversation doesn't do. I'm really happy to have a debate about that. If someone thinks that's not the right way. I don't think politics is the right way. Our political system is completely broken. I'm sorry to say, it's completely broken. We have a completely defunct system. It's not, you know, it's just not working. Right across the world, we're seeing it. It's not working. So there's got to be something different. I think something radical happens politically. I can't trust a politician. That's my issue.
Thanks, Abdul. Really appreciate that opinion, especially coming from your arts perspective as well, which is something that a lot of us, well, myself definitely, I have no experience in. So hearing it from a different perspective is really good. Claire, do you want to come in on that? I see.
Yeah, no, I would definitely wouldn't challenge you on that, Abdul. I think that's really exciting, and I've experienced theatre about subjects that, you know, I don't know very much about, and it's been just really enlightening. And I think that, you know, that you know, I think, you know, you're talking a lot about relevance and the way that we are irrelevant to so many people because they have different priorities. And, you know, just to kind of I haven't always been able to do this, so, you know, I've had different priorities too, you know, and I've been at a time when I haven't been able to consider, I don't eat meat now, but the type of chicken that I buy, the price of the chicken, and how that has been, you know, factory farmed, because that has not been a priority for me. The priority for me was maybe putting food on the table for my daughter. And so, you know, it was bound not to be a priority for me at the time. But I think that in terms of how we can best support work with communities, like I don't think it's for me to say what communities need, but it's for us to find out and that's part of the reason that I'm here. But it is really clear that we're not relevant, and because of that, we're missing a really huge section of our society. And I think local groups like like Cardiff Greenpeace can fall into the trap of thinking, oh, because we're friendly people, because we're very welcoming, and we're quite sort of cuddly, then we're people will come, and we can just say that we're diverse. It's not good enough to say that we're welcoming, and it's not good enough to say we're diverse. That doesn't solve, the issue. So I know from my experience of working with communities outside of the environment sector, that authenticity really, really matters. And in order to do that, you have to build trust, and that can take a very long time. And it's been my experience that communities are fed up with having things done to them. This is why I'm a really big fan of the participatory action research model, because it really enables communities to find solutions to problems that they have identified, not something that the great and the good has identified. And I think time needs to be, we've talked about time, and it is, possibly over and above money in some respects. It's just such a commodity, isn't it? And I think that, lending our time, lending our skills and resources to communities and saying, well, how can we work with you? I'm thinking theatre now, right? I'm thinking, well, how do I, work with you? And then we work at something that, we can get funding for, and we can make really, really relevant, and go through that really hard, long process of that consultation with people, that very two-way process. And so for me, like a start building with any building trust with any group, whether it's community, grassroots groups, or just other groups I want to work with, is going to a meeting, taking an action point, take an action point, and then go back to the next meeting. And I find that that can, as a very practical sort of
I think just in terms of the kind of working together, developing, building, I completely agree that that's the way to do it. But I think also the challenge at the moment in a place like Wales, in a place like Cardiff, the big problem at the moment is, funding wise. For example, you have an arts council which supports very little Black Asian theatre companies, and until recently it has only supported one Black or Asian led company, whether that's theatre, dance, whatever, for the last 10 years. And its staff team is pretty much all white. So I think the thing is, the institutions within, and sorry, Bablin, I know you're a counsellor, and that was not a personal thing at all. Genuinely is about the institutions. I don't trust them anymore, and I think politics is an extension of those institutions, and is an extension, or is a response to capitalism and how we govern within those systems. And part of me feels like, if we really want the change, like I said earlier, revolution is the only way, right? Because we're not getting anywhere. We took down a statue in Cardiff, in City Hall. Wow, is that equality? I don't think so. Like, that's one statue gone. After how long? It needed a man to die for you to make a decision that Picton shouldn't be in that room. That shows me how much Hugh Thomas really knows his history. He could have done that a long time ago, but that white man in power needed a man to die across the seas to go, oh, this is a really bad idea. So what I'm trying to say is, I think the institutions that govern us and have the money, the resource, I don't trust them, because they are there to hold on to power. These old white men, sorry to all the white men in this conversation, but white men who have these powerful positions want to hold on to these powerful positions. So how can we access those resources? Are there other ways? Are there other means? And that's big. I don't know. I feel like we are constantly asking for things and we're not being given them. We're not being given them. And that's not just from like the funding perspective, but from change perspective. And we look to our politicians, and our politicians can't deliver them. So where do we go? Our system is broken, right?
I think that was the point I started with, Abdul, was that I got into politics knowing the system isn't working for me, okay? And that's what, you know, to bring change, you need to be involved in the democratic systems that we do have, you know, because unless you get into those institutions, unless you get into those systems, your voice won't be heard. You know,
they said that 20 years ago. They said that 40 years ago.
They did, but
the systems are still there. And what I'm saying is those systems don't work for this day and age and what we need. And therefore, I completely respect that we should go into those systems to break them down. But I guess my question is, if those systems are not working, then do we need to get rid of those systems? And that's really the big question that we need to be asking. And I think that's where my thinking is at, and that's all I was trying to get at. I appreciate you've got into this to politics to change the world, but the thing is, the world has stayed the same or got worse through the political system that we have.
And it's you know, if you want to get rid of those systems, yeah, you're quite right in saying, you know, you need a revolution to happen, but I don't see that happening in UK anytime soon, you know. So
then I guess what's the point of this
in some ways to, you know, what we're expecting. I mean,
change anything, right? This is why I find it really difficult. Like, if that's not the space we need to go to, then are we wasting our time having these conversations? Because the big things never shift, do they? So it doesn't matter how much we talk about our BAME communities and this community and that community.
But you know, Abdul, since being elected, you know, you talked about the Picton statue. Yes, it came from BLM movement and everything. It was actually not Hugh Thomas. It was the Lord Mayor of the city who originally asked for it, and he is a Black Lord Mayor of the city. So you know, and unless people like him or I get into those systems, those things won't be discussed. Those things won't happen. It doesn't matter what movement is going on, okay?
What I'm saying is the system doesn't work. We need to break it.
Not flag that up to him, it wouldn't have happened, okay?
Why does it need a Black man to flag that up in this day and age? I'm sorry, the system doesn't work. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, I know you're in the system, therefore you have to protect the system.
No, not at all, not at all. In fact, I challenge the system more than protect the system. That's why I went in to challenge the system.
I know Daniel Delay, the mayor, that
thing. Because
I appreciate that. I know it's the Black man who put that forward.
It wasn't getting to the ethnic minority and our people, as Nisha said about recycling. People don't understand the kind of protocols they put in place, maybe because of a language barrier and things. They don't engage with the consultation period. They probably don't get any feedback from ethnic minority because they don't reach them.
Maybe they do understand it. The system doesn't listen to them.
Communities, okay? And every time I hear hard to reach communities, I correct them in those meetings and I say, they're not hard to reach, it's just you don't know how to reach them. So you need to improve your practice and make sure you're reaching them.
Or we say, get out, move on.
You know, if I just resented the system and wasn't holding that position, those things would have carried on happening without being challenged. And this is why we do need to hold positions to challenge those thoughts. And that's when change will happen. You know,
I'll just add to that. I think, you know, we've come, you know, we talk about 20 years ago, 20 years now, you know, a lot has moved on. You know, I've certainly, coming from Malaysia 20 odd years ago, I found my home in Wales, and you know, I'm actually proud of the history in Wales because of the multiculturalism and being able to celebrate diversity. And you know, I know, you know, Cardiff Lord Mayor Daniel Dieth, you know, I've spoken to him several times. You know, it's nice to be able to have that, you know, that commonality in certain areas, and to see progress. You know, he's a very smart man in his own right, regardless of the color of his skin. And you know, what you know, something in EMWWA that we're doing, you know, we're trying to say silence is not an option. You know, we need to share what has happened in the sorrow and the outrage of what has happened to George Floyd, you know, and, you know, there was grave injustice there leading to that tragic loss, yes. But, you know, certainly in EMWWA, many of our own community members have participated in Black Lives Matters. There's been virtual meetings. We're almost going towards a future where we want to address equality and justice. And, you know, an environmental impact is a huge impact. It is all about education. I mean, frankly speaking, yes, I came from a very diverse background in Malaysia, where racism was very paramount, because, you know, I came from a country where there were three you know, Chinese, Indian, Malays, three nationalities, three religions, all trying to work together. So, you know, I have experienced racism through my growing up. Moving to the UK, different experiences emerge. But certainly what has happened in this last few months has got me confidently being able to openly talk about it, because suddenly we have a platform. You know, I'm reading a book now by Rennie Edo Lodge, which I recommended to Kaz, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. And it's a really, really interesting book. I would have never picked this book up had we not engaged in conversation. Renee Edo Lodge, she's a journalist, and she has been writing for many years. And, you know, she took to the panel and opened a discussion, and, you know, her thoughts and feelings about it are very nicely documented on how she was actually scared to bring that up. But having brought it up, she has got negatives and positives about it, and it was her experience. And, you know, it's changed the national conversation about race and where we live in. So, you know, there is a lot of change to be made. And having a forum like this, you know, breaks the ice, because we can openly, non-judgmentally talk about these things. And I think it's a very positive move forward. Whilst we may not be able to change certain political or, you know, structures very quickly, we can certainly do things quickly as when we come together, when all of us come together with a we statement.
I completely appreciate that, but I think one thing about Wales, and as being someone who's come in, and I've been there 10 years, but I'm about to leave, actually, because I do think it's an extremely racist place. And I do think that the communities that live there, I think we accept too much, and we don't rally, like, we don't respond. I mean, why I'm not speaking to people, white people about race. You know, Renee wrote that a while ago, and I guess what I'm saying is that I feel like we are behind in many ways, but I do think there needs to be more strong arming of the institutions, because there's a really weird situation in Wales where actually diversity, when we talk about diversity, Welsh language supersedes anything else. So then any other conversation around diversity is really tricky, because everything's like, well, we're diverse, we've got Welsh language, you know, to be thinking about. And the fact that lots of white people in Wales, especially Welsh white people, think that they were the first and they are the last colonized space, and therefore they understand what slavery is or what it means to be colonized. And that's a really interesting, we need to be having these debates. These are the important debates that we need to have if we want to see an equal and equitable Cardiff, before we can start to talk about these issues around environment. And I think that's where the challenge is. And I feel like I completely hear you both, and I'm not dismissing that. I think these spaces are important, but equally, the positions of power, when you look across the board, are all held by mainly white men, if we're going to be real about this. And actually, that system isn't working. That's my thought. And I think that system is completely broken. And we can keep propping it up, keep talking about how we're going to change things from the inside, but the system's broken. It's as simple as that. And that's why we're not making any headway on the environment issue, because it's so broken. That's just my view.
Yeah, thanks everyone for that. That question clearly opened many doors and many opinions, and I appreciate every single one of them. Didn't really want to come in and interrupt there, because I think it's good to just air as much as possible and get that broad range of views. So thank you for engaging a lot on that. I think that's something that we're definitely going to reflect on as well. And go on, Bablin.
About engaging ethnic minorities. I know I was, in the previous question I did say, that there's those hurdles. But I think somebody did mention about the relevance to these communities, the environmental. I mean, it's so important ethnic minority communities do engage with the environmental movement. Okay, there's no doubt about it, because you've seen with COVID how disproportionately ethnic minority were actually hit by COVID-19 across UK. The environment that ethnic minority communities actually live within, whether it's because of the economical background, etc. But there's many things around the environment that is impacting on the health and the life of ethnic minorities, and it's so, it is important that we do engage with ethnic minority and get them to engage with the movement too and understand. So I didn't want to leave it on a bad note that, well, there's no chance, you're not going to get the ethnic minority involved. There are ways of getting ethnic minority to be involved with this movement by making it relevant to them. And I did like what Clare was saying in terms of participatory action movement kind of thing. So getting their thoughts in a room and keeping them involved in the way this movement goes would be useful to keep ethnic minority engaged with the process, because as I said, the environmental impact, we were talking about diabetes, for instance, as you know, I'm involved with the health and eye health, and, diabetes, we know is higher chances of diabetes within ethnic minority, and therefore they see more COVID. And we were talking, well, why is it a given fact that 4 times more likely, if you're from an Asian background, South Asian background, you're more likely to experience diabetes? And in this discussion room amongst researchers, they were saying it's because genetically the way they've adapted to the environment, because of the experience of famine state to different dietary, more healthier diet state, has impacted on their genetic makeup, and therefore they are more likely to experience conditions as diabetes, etc. So environmental situations has impacted on BAME communities for centuries, and what they experience now, whether it's COVID, whether it's diabetes, whether it's eye health, whatever, it's linked from that environment they were living in, and what they're experiencing now in the environment now, it's disproportionately impacting on them. So, which is why I do, profoundly believe that it's so important ethnic minority communities do engage with this environmental movement. And there's ways and means of doing that, and we need to make sure we do that. Okay.
Thank you, Bablin. I'm just conscious of time, so yeah, we'll move on to if there's any questions for the panel. There was another question, but I think we'll delve in a little deeper maybe. But if there are no questions, we can go back to it and just give a statement each. But yeah, if there's any questions from anyone else involved on the call, perhaps you want to put it in the chat or put your mic on and speak. Just give you this opportunity now. Whilst waiting for that, someone has also commented on the chat, Rebecca. She's made a comment saying to try and engage people, selling the self-sufficient lifestyle is cheaper and involves less plastic. It also doesn't really cost anything to attend protests, as I do for XR. Cool, thanks for that point, Rebecca. If there's no other
There's
questions.
A comment from Marcus, says to the panel, who do you see as the enemy in the climate change struggle, and how do we collectively channel them? And then Marcus has said, I suggest the enemy is the fossil fuel industry and the big money that supports it and benefits from it. So we should be challenging them, perhaps. That was a question.
Does anyone want to answer that? About enemies? Kind of slightly spoken about enemies, I feel.
Yeah.
I just like to to just put a little comment. there are a lot of things we can't control, but what we can control is what we do ourselves. So if we can make a little difference on what we can control and what we want to participate in and how we want to move forward, that's a positive in itself.
Thanks, Nisha. Anything else anyone wants to add to that, or any other remarks? No? Cool, sounds good. Yeah, so just conscious there's only a couple of minutes left, so I think we should just round it up. And if anyone's got any other final statements now in the next couple of minutes, then yeah, put your hand up or whatever. Yeah, just say thank you for joining. Going back to, well, the whole purpose of this panel discussion and what actually we've just spoken about, I think we were really conscious as well, and I sort of want to echo what you've said about Abdul, and I can sense, you know, not frustration, but I hear your points in that we were sort of debating about whether even to do something like this, because A, does it just look tokenistic? B, what's it actually doing? Is it just another blimmin' Zoom call? There's all these questions going on, but then sort of, you know, you again, then echoing the points of what Nisha and Bablin have said, you've got to start doing something, start having those conversations, because also many people are still, you know, right at the very beginning of things, or just wanting to learn or still need to learn. But I know that there are such wider, huge systemic issues that we're not going to solve in this call, but that really good points have been made. And I think that is the point, that a lot of these issues can be systemic and huge and structural, and yeah, that it might require a lot more power and people change. But then there are also things, you know, you can do within your own community, specific from a Cardiff Friends of the Earth point of view. Like sometimes we get bogged down with, you know, the wider aspect of things, when, you know, sometimes you just have to narrow it down to your own community, start small. What can you do in your own community, in your own environment? So yeah, that's the final remark I'm going to make from Cardiff Friends of the Earth. There's our contact details if anyone's got any questions. We will probably post some snippets from this recording, some interesting points. And yeah, if anyone's got anything else to say, you can say it now. If not, Ken's also just spoken and said we can only do so much as individuals. We can do much more collaboratively and look at the structural causes and effects. Completely agree with that.
Can I just say, I'm not dismissing what you're doing, just for clarity. I think I'm just at a point where I'm tired of hearing that we're going to see change. I want it now. I'm demanding it now, not just for myself, for the generations to come, and the young people that we're going to leave completely. What we're going to leave to the young people, the next generation coming after us. And I think that's why it's just, for me, I think if we're serious about this, we need to stop asking. We need to demand, and if the demand doesn't work, people fight. When survival is at stake, we have to fight. And collectively, we understand the Earth's survival is at stake here. And if we're not ready to fight for that, then what the hell are we going to fight for? That's the only thing, because we can. That's my only point. Sorry. I do think this is really important.
Thank you, Abdul. Yeah.
Do you mind if I respond? Yeah, you honestly sound like, you know, my overwhelmed days, and I do get them. Like, I'm completely overwhelmed, and I wonder if I can ever make a difference. And my hope is that, you know, we can make a difference together. You also sound like, I mean, and this is not a plug. It's just like what you're sort of saying here is that Extinction Rebellion's approach is very much that approach. So I'm just kind of putting that out there because there's quite a lot going on with Extinction Rebellion at the moment, as you'll see. So yeah, it's just interesting to hear you say demand, and you know, this is, yeah, okay, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks Abdul, thanks Claire for that. Any final statements from you, Nisha or Bablin, before we sign off?
Can I just say thank you for arranging it, Bryony, and it's been good to have that discussion, really. And I think both the environmental movement and the, you know, ethnic minority and race equalities movement, they have a lot in common, that we are up against the system, as Abdul quite rightly recognised, and there's so much that needs doing, and the time is clicking, you know, it's ticking away. We do need change, and we do need urgent change, especially on the, you know, with the climate change, etc. So yeah, demanding change is needed. It is needed, and I'm fully supportive of that. But I really thank you for arranging this, and I certainly don't take it as a tokenism. And I hope this is a continuous relationship between the communities and the environmental movement, and hope we build more from it, really, and not just a one-off event.
And I will echo that as well. Thank you very much. It's certainly opened my eyes, my views, my reading of books are changing as well. So thank you for opening this discussion for us.
No problem at all. Thank you everyone for joining and for giving your participation right from the beginning. Some really interesting points, and we'll take these and be in touch soon, and hopefully work together in some sense once we collate everything and digest. So thank you very much, it's really appreciated.